Corpus Christi is one of the most fascinating festivals in the Christian tradition, though not all denominations celebrate it because it can be quite complex. Even though it's been observed for thousands of years, many people still don't know its true origin and meaning. In fact, the story of Corpus Christi is often misunderstood, even by Christians who don't fully grasp its significance. But from now on, we'll discover the truth together. The story begins in the year 1263. At that time, Europe was full of strong religious beliefs and practices. There was a priest from Prague, a city in northern Italy, who was struggling with a serious crisis of faith. This priest, named Peter, had doubts about whether Jesus Christ was really present in the Holy Eucharist, which caused him great distress. To find answers and strengthen his faith, Peter decided to go on a pilgrimage to Rome, the eternal city. Back then, many believers would travel to the tombs of the apostles St. Peter and St. Paul in Rome to deepen their faith and receive divine blessings. So Peter set off from Prague, traveling through different regions on his spiritual journey. Along the way, he decided to stop in the town of Bolsena. Bolsena was well known for its devotion to Saint Christina, a virgin and martyr from the 3rd or 4th century. This town, with its large and beautiful lake, had a rich religious history. Saint Christina was often called the Saint of Misfortunes because she endured many attempts on her life due to her faith. Born into a pagan family, Saint Christina converted to Christianity at a young age, despite her parents' objections. Her dedication to her Christian faith angered her father, who held an important position in Bolsena. Determined to make her give up her faith, her father subjected her to various tortures and attempts on her life. But according to tradition, all these attempts failed due to miraculous interventions. Finally, her father decided to tie a heavy stone to Christina's body and throw her into Lake Bolsena, believing this would surely kill her. However, a miracle happened. Instead of sinking, the stone that Christina was tied to miraculously floated on the water's surface, keeping her alive and preventing her from drowning. If you're curious to find out what happens next, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and keep watching the video. As the stone floated, Saint Christina stood on it, protected by divine intervention. This incredible event showed God's protection over Saint Christina during her trials. Moreover, as she stood on the floating stone, her footprints were left on it, and they remain there to this day. These footprints became solid proof of the miracle and a sacred relic for the faithful. Over the centuries, these footprints have been preserved as a symbol of Saint Christina's presence and the divine help that saved her from death. Saint Christina's footprints on the stone became an object of worship and devotion for local Christians and pilgrims who visited Bolsena, seeking healing, protection, and spiritual guidance. This miraculous event caused Christina's father, upon witnessing the wonder, to collapse and die. Though Christina survived, she continued to face many attempts on her life, but was always saved by divine interventions until her death. The devotion to Saint Christina was strong in Bolsena, and many pilgrims visited her tomb, seeking blessings. It was in this atmosphere of deep religious belief that the priest Peter decided to celebrate a Mass, asking for Saint Christina's help to strengthen his faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. During the Mass celebrated by Father Peter in the town of Bolsena, something truly extraordinary happened. Peter, still struggling with his doubts about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, lifted the consecrated host during the moment of consecration. It was then that the host began to bleed. Blood flowed from the host, staining his hands and the cloth on the altar. This unexpected and miraculous event amazed not only Peter, but also the people who were there, who watched the miracle with awe and reverence. Father Peter, overwhelmed with emotion and relief, couldn't continue the Mass. He carefully placed the bleeding host on the altar cloth and, filled with tears of joy and renewed faith, went to the sacristy. As he walked, drops of blood fell on the floor and the steps of the altar, leaving marks that would be preserved as sacred relics. News of the miracle quickly spread throughout the church, and other priests came to see what had happened. They were all impressed by the visible evidence of the miracle, the blood-stained cloth and the bloodied stones. With a heart full of gratitude and still in shock, Peter decided to take the blood-stained cloth and report the miracle directly to Pope Urban IV, who was in the nearby town of Orvieto. When Peter arrived in Orvieto, He told the Pope the entire story. The Pope, deeply moved by the account, recognized the miracle as a divine sign of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. He recalled a vision that Saint Juliana of Liège had received, which spoke of the need for a special feast to celebrate the Eucharist. Let's pause here to explain this beautiful and intriguing story in more detail. Saint Juliana of Liège played a key role in the origin of the Feast of Corpus Christi. In the early 13th century, Juliana, a young nun of 16, began having mystical visions that revealed the need for a special celebration dedicated to the Eucharist. In one of these visions, she saw a bright white disk with a dark spot on one side. This image puzzled her deeply, and she spent many years in prayer trying to understand its meaning. After a period of spiritual reflection, Juliana finally understood that the white disk represented the Church and its devotion to the Eucharist. However, the dark spot symbolized the absence of a specific feast that properly honored the Blessed Sacrament. Although Holy Thursday was already a celebration that commemorated the institution of the Eucharist, this feast was also associated with the sorrow of Christ's Passion. Juliana realized that Jesus wanted a joyful and solemn feast dedicated solely to the glory of the Eucharist. Reluctant to share her visions, Juliana hesitated for 20 years before she finally found the courage to tell a trusted priest named Jacques Pantaleon. He believed in the authenticity of Juliana's visions and encouraged her to spread her message. However, time passed, and Juliana eventually died, with her visions fading into obscurity. Years later, the priest Jacques Pantaleon, the only person who knew about Juliana's visions, became Pope Urban IV. Pope Urban IV, upon hearing the story from Father Peter, was deeply moved and immediately recognized the importance of the miracle. With keen spiritual insight and the memory of Saint Juliana's vision, which had predicted the need for a feast dedicated to the Eucharist, the Pope understood that this miracle was a divine sign. He decided to act quickly to confirm the event's authenticity and spread the miracle's story, leading to the establishment of a new liturgical feast. To verify the miracle, Pope Urban IV gathered a group of trusted theologians and experts, including the famous St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure. These men, known for their wisdom and holiness, were sent to Bolsena to investigate the event and examine the relics. St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, along with other theologians, carefully studied the evidence. They examined the blood-stained cloth, the bloodied stones, and gathered testimonies from the people who witnessed the miracle. Once the miracle's authenticity was confirmed, the theologians began organizing the return to Orvieto, bringing the precious relics with them, including the blood-stained cloth. News of the miracle had already started to spread, and as the theologians left Bolsena, many locals, filled with emotion and reverence, began to follow them. This crowd grew as they advanced, with people from nearby villages and towns joining the procession. As the procession neared Orvieto, Pope Urban IV, informed of the successful verification and the approach of the miraculous relics, decided to meet the procession himself. The Pope, accompanied by clergy and church dignitaries, left his ceremonial vehicle as they neared the bridge, where the theologians and the crowd were arriving. When the procession reached the bridge, it was a moment of great solemnity and emotion. Pope Urban IV, wearing his pontifical robes, knelt in adoration before the Eucharist, represented by the miraculous relics. He reverently received the blood-stained cloth and the consecrated host, and, together with the procession, walked towards the city of Orvieto. This event marked the first Eucharistic procession, which would become a central element in the celebration of Corpus Christi. Pope Urban IV, convinced by the theologians' verification and the profound spiritual significance of the event, decided to establish a solemn feast to honor the Eucharist. In 1264, he issued a decree called the Bull Transiturus, creating the Feast of Corpus Christi. The bull emphasized the need to reaffirm faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, especially during a time when various heresies were challenging this belief. The Pope saw the feast as a way to strengthen the faith of the people and promote devotion to the Eucharist. He also highlighted the role of Eucharistic miracles, like the one at Bolsena, as divine signs confirming the truth of Christ's presence in the consecrated bread and wine. After declaring the feast, Pope Urban IV made sure that the new celebration would be marked by a rich and deeply spiritual liturgy. Understanding the importance of a rite that truly reflected the glory of the Eucharist, the Pope called upon some of the most renowned theologians of his time to compose the hymns and prayers that would be used during the solemnity. Among those theologians were St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, both recognized as intellectual and spiritual giants of the 13th century. When the time came to reveal the hymns, all the theologians gathered in the presence of the Pope. St. Thomas Aquinas, known for his deep knowledge and spirituality, was the first to present his work. He began to recite his hymn, Lauda Sion, Praise, O Sion. This hymn, through beautifully crafted verses, expressed the belief in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the deep reverence owed to this sacrament. St. Thomas's hymn was so remarkable and moving that all the other theologians present remained silent, deeply impressed by the perfection and spirituality of his words. In a show of humility and recognition of St. Thomas's superior work, the other theologians tore up their own manuscripts, acknowledging that St. Thomas's hymn perfectly captured the essence of the new feast. Thus, Lauda Sion became the official hymn of the Feast of Corpus Christi. This event not only highlighted the extraordinary theological and poetic skill of St. Thomas Aquinas, but also showed the unity and humility among the greatest theologians of the Church in recognizing the best work to glorify the Eucharist. The first celebration of the Feast of Corpus Christi, instituted by Pope Urban IV, marked a moment of deep devotion and joy within the Church. The celebration was carefully planned to emphasize the importance of the Eucharist and strengthen belief in the real presence of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. The inaugural Corpus Christi celebration included a solemn Eucharistic procession, which became a key tradition of the feast. During this procession, the Blessed Sacrament was carried through the streets in a monstrance, allowing the faithful to worship and honor the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. The city of Orvieto, where Pope Urban IV was residing at the time, became the focal point of this celebration. The significance of Orvieto in the history of Corpus Christi was further highlighted by the construction of a magnificent cathedral designed to house and preserve the blood-stained cloth, the main relic from the miracle in Bolsena. The Cathedral of Orvieto, known as the Duomo di Orvieto, began construction in 1290, just a few years after the feast was established. This cathedral is a masterpiece of Italian Gothic architecture with a richly decorated facade and impressive interiors. The first celebration of Corpus Christi and the construction of the Cathedral of Orvieto are intertwined events that created a lasting legacy of Eucharistic devotion, commemorating the miracle at Bolsena and the vision of Saint Juliana of Liège. These events continue to inspire and strengthen the faith of many Christians, reaffirming the central role of the Eucharist in the life of the Church and the spirituality of its followers. It's important to note that some religions may choose not to believe in or observe the Corpus Christi holiday for various reasons. Some have their own beliefs and practices that don't include celebrating the Eucharist, or prefer not to venerate the host and wine as the body and blood of Christ. Additionally, there may be theological differences and different interpretations of what the Bible says about the Eucharist. However, it's essential to remember that, regardless of religious differences, the most important thing is to have faith in God and practice principles of love, compassion, and mutual respect. Respecting religious diversity and working towards peace and understanding among different traditions are values that go beyond religious boundaries and are fundamental to building a more tolerant and inclusive world. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel, click the bell to turn on notifications, leave a like. And thanks for watching.